All right, we made it. This is our last video. And what we're going to be doing in this video is looking at how do you actually use the assessment tool and what you have found from the assessment tool to either introduce change into your church or to at least engage with leadership and talk to them about that. And so I'm going to share my screen again. And what we're going to do in this video is how do you use your church health assessment tool? And I think the easiest way for us to think about this is this way. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to actually do the assessment, right? So you created the biblical framework for a healthy church. You have all the different elements. You incorporated those then into an actual assessment tool. That you then use that assessment tool to actually do the assessment. So that's this part. Once you have the assessment and you've done the assessment from all the different elements, you then want to assess the data that you've collected. You actually want to look at that and say, okay, now I need to begin to say how closely, and the assessment is based on how closely does this conform to the biblical standard from what we see in the scriptures. And then once we have made that assessment or that judgment, we then want to say, okay, now I understand how healthy they are. Here's some possible steps. Step 3, here's some possible steps that we can move towards even greater health. And so use the word greater health. You don't want to talk about your church being sick or on life support, but more that, hey, what we want to do is all of us need to be healthier. I can lose some weight. I can do a little bit more exercise. And so that's what I can do for greater health. And so once you've assessed the data, what are some steps that your church can take for greater health? Then what you want to do is you want to formulate a report. That's the 4th step. And the reason that you want to formulate a report is you want to, for your own thinking and for your ability for fulfilling what this learning experience is all about, is it allow you to slowly process and mull over and think through what you've just been doing. And then also it will allow you to be able to articulate very clearly to leadership, which is the next step, what that you have observed, both strengths and weaknesses, things that are healthy and not as healthy, which then brings us to the 5th step, which is share your findings with your church leadership. Again, this should have been done much earlier in the sense that you have asked permission from your church leadership, and we looked at this in the introduction, to actually do the assessment. If they do not give you that permission, you can still do the assessment, but you will not share your findings with the church. You're more just going to have to do it from a more distant standpoint, and do it as a theoretical, both an assessment and what you would do with it. But if your church leadership is good with allowing you to share your findings, then by all means, share your findings. And then what you're going to want to do is once you have shared your findings and your church leadership sees what you've done, ask them for permission to implement one change in your church context. And so you can choose whatever that would be. But you want to say, I want to implement one change. And so whether that's in the area of moving from a virtual church to now go to in person as the COVID restrictions in your country hopefully are going to begin to decrease, or how do you implement greater discipleship, or members understanding their nature of the body, or elders and deacons, or whatever it happens to be for your church. Select one of those that's very doable for you and begin to implement that. And that is what we're looking for in this project. Okay, so there you have it. And so just by way of review, to make sure you're really clear, is what you've done is you began at the beginning saying, okay, we're going to go from the scriptures to actually making significant or minor changes in our church so they can become more healthy. Now, how we did that is we went from scripture, we used the 8S process, or the 8-step process. And as we went through the 8-step process, we then also realized that we have different categories or elements that need to be a part of this framework. We then use that framework and the elements of that framework to create an assessment tool. We then use that assessment tool to make an assessment. And once we've made the assessment, we can then implement the change. And that's the process that you're going to want to be able to go through. There are entire ministries that do this. They go into a church and they analyze the church and they try to help the church move in a more healthy direction. This is exactly what they do. And so I hope this has been helpful, and I hope that this will lead to your relationship with your leadership being a stronger relationship, and that your church will actually move to a greater place of health. So I hope this has been helpful. I have appreciated spending this time with you, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Thanks.